If you were to apply just this one tip into every single study habit you're doing, I guarantee you are going to ace every single final that you are going to take this semester. What is that tip? Hey everybody, Organized Biology here, and today we're going through some study habits. You know, my students were telling me this semester that a lot of them don't know how to study properly, so they actually recommended me make a video about this. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to discuss 7 different tips and techniques to studying. And now you've probably heard this before, you should do these things, but I'm going to put a twist on it. And I'm actually going to show you what you should be doing in your notebooks, in your diagrams, on your computers, so that way you can ace your final. So let's get rolling with tip number 1. Find what's right for you. You see, I'm going to blabber on for the next so many minutes, I'm not sure how many, about all these different tips and techniques. But the thing is I only use about 2 of them. The other ones, they just don't work as well for me. So while I'm going through them, I want you to write down 1 or 2 that really stick with you, that you're like, oh, I think that would work really well for me. Okay? Now, that's not to say that they don't work in general, but certain ones work better for certain people. So take everything with a grain of salt, but pin down which one you think will be most pertinent to you. And it might change over time. Maybe for one class you want to do one technique, and for the other class maybe a different technique will be more beneficial. Experiment around, play around, get creative with it, take an interest in your learning. So tip number 2, get multimodal. Yes, I am using a vocabulary term, multimodal. This just means we're basically using a variety of different techniques, different pictures, images, words, in order to put together our learning. You see, our brain likes to think in multiple different dimensions. We like to see things visually, we like to hear things, we like to speak things out, and all of that combined together creates a really deep amount of learning. And so therefore, as you are studying, I want you to try to put things in a bunch of different ways. A couple of the more popular ways would be like flashcards, right? Now, these are awesome for learning vocabulary terms and really short things, but I wouldn't recommend these for deeper concepts. And as you're using the flashcards, what I like to do is I just like to throw them everywhere. So say you make 50 flashcards, throw them all on the ground. And then as you pick them up, read the side that is up and try to predict what's on the other side. So for example, you might read the description of a vocabulary term and you have to match it with the right vocabulary term. And you have to guess what is on the other side, the description. Now, the second thing you could do within this multimodal studying technique is rewriting your notes. Oh, what a joy! Now here's the thing, this is what I did all of in college. This is the one thing that worked for me. I would take my notes page basically from an entire class and I would rewrite every word. And while I was rewriting it, I was trying to remember, hey, what was the teacher saying right here? What were they showing me? What were they making a joke about if they were a good teacher? I tried to connect everything that they said into my writing as I was writing. So when you're rewriting your notes, don't just do it passively like, oh yeah, the cell does this. No, that doesn't help you at all, but think about what you were learning about in that moment. Think back to the classroom environment. Think back to the questions that were asked as you were doing it, and that'll help deepen your learning. And the third multimodal thing I'm going to talk about is recreating your diagrams. This is especially helpful in a science course and human anatomy course, which I teach to my students. I use diagrams all the time. And what I want my students to be able to do is actually draw it out and then explain what's happening on the diagram. So for example, how do we smell? Well, in order to smell, we have to have an odorant bind to this, which triggers this process, which sends the signal, which talks to this part, and then that talks back to the brain, then you actually perceive it as smell. There are like 7, 8 different steps to that, and I want my students to be able to re-diagram what is exactly happening. Because then, by re-diagramming it, now you've got pictures, right? You're drawing pictures, you're combining it with words that you might be diagramming, oh, like this is happening here, this is happening here, and then from there, you can explain the entire thing, and I could ask probably 100 different questions just about that diagram, but since you took the time to diagram it again, you are likely going to answer any of those questions correctly. Tip number 3, if you were to apply just this one tip into every single study habit you're doing, I guarantee you are going to ace every single final that you are going to take this semester. What is that tip? Eliminate distractions. You see, learning occurs during short periods of incredibly focused attention. I mean, think about the last time you learned how to do something pretty trivial. Maybe it's like cutting vegetables in a kitchen, or maybe even like rollerblading or riding your bike. In order to learn those things, you had to be focused on the techniques for a very short period of time, but that focus was intense, right? Like you're a kid, you're like so focused on the handlebars and where your weight was and everything. The same thing applies when you are studying. So in order to be focused for these 20, 30-minute periods at a time, you must eliminate distractions. And what's the biggest distraction that we have? Our phones. Okay, maybe it's like a baby crying in the other room, or maybe it's a dog barking at you, but most of the time it's your phone. So guys, I don't know if you realize this, but you are acutely aware that your phone is somewhere nearby. whether it's in your pocket, whether it's, what you're looking at right now, or whether it's even across the room from you. That takes a lot of your brain power because we are all just slightly addicted to social media, to our phones. So if you take your phone, not right now because you're learning from this video, and put it far, far away while you are studying, I guarantee you that every tip you're going to apply from this video will be so much more successful and you'll feel so much better about your learning. Tip number 4, test yourself. Yes, you are already going to take a test. But the thing is if you create the questions, you create a study guide, and you have to answer them, in this way, you're going to attack the concepts from a different angle. Let me show you what I mean by this. All right, so let's say the instructor is going to ask you a question about amino acids, and you're going to figure out how to test yourself. So let's think of different ways that we could phrase questions about amino acids. If you would like to try this with me, go ahead and pause the video and make your own. The first question, obviously, we could ask is, what are amino acids? Awesome. Well, if we can answer that, then, well, what's the purpose of amino acids, right? So we know what they are, but what do they do? Okay, so if you can answer that, well, how many types are there? And if you know that, well, where did they come from in the first place? How do they get to your cells? What are some examples? Do they have prefixes and suffixes related to them? So you see, just from one term, I can make, 8 different questions? There's 7. 7 different questions about amino acids just by using different beginner words like how, what, or where, asking about the prefixes and suffixes. So all of these things combined helps you attack the same concept from different angles. So try that when you're studying next time. Whew, that was hard work. Tip number 5. I'm gonna start with a Jeopardy question here. What was SpongeBob and Patrick's favorite pastime? Blowing bubbles. And in this part, I want you to make bubble diagrams. Okay, now what the heck are bubble diagrams? Well, bubble diagrams are basically a sketch of how things connect. For example, let me take the word anatomy. Well, anatomy refers to the structure of the body. And the structure of the body determines the function of the body. And so if structure determines function, well, what are some structure to function relationships we've seen before? Well, a red blood cell is shaped like a donut so it can carry oxygen. Wait, why am I just doing things in the air? Let me show you on the whiteboard. Here's my brainchild previously. So anatomy, structure fits function. Then there's that example, red blood cells being shaped to carry oxygen. But then we could go over and say, hey, what's a specific structure we talked about in anatomy? So maybe we talk about, nerves. Okay, so what are nerves? Well, we know that nerves are bundles of axons. Okay, well then that leads the question, well, what the heck are axons? Well, axons specifically are the signaling branch of neurons. And we know for some nerves, like the spinal nerves, there are 31 pairs of them. And we know in the spinal nerves, they carry both sensory and motor information. Well, and then there are also cranial nerves, and there are different types of axons depending on where they're at. So just by drawing this sort of web, we're connecting concepts to different terms, to different structures, to different functions, and putting together a better picture. And just by making this picture, my brain will remember this image, and it will help me to remember things for the test. All right, so now that you know how to do bubble diagrams, let's move on to tip number 6. Teach other creatures. Yes, I said creatures for a reason because this could be your stuffed animal, it could be your pet, it could be your parents, it could be your girlfriend, it can be whoever the heck you want it to be. The thing is if you have to teach something, you have to simplify it. You need to find a creature. All right, I found my creature. So now that I have my creature, I'm going to pick just any topic that I need to study. Let's say it's the Bohr effect for anatomy. So the next 10 seconds, I'm going to teach the Bohr effect to my little puppy here. So Gracie, did you know that the Bohr effect, she's already bored. Come on, girl. Keep your attention here. The Bohr effect occurs when the blood becomes really acidic because carbon dioxide is coming out of the cells. And if carbon dioxide is coming out of the cells, it makes carbonic acid, which makes it acidic, which actually kicks off the oxygen molecule so oxygen can feed the cells. Oh yeah, because cells need to make energy with oxygen. So notice as I taught, I had to think through the process. I had to actually know the content pretty well in order to relay it to my creature here. And clearly she learned it perfectly. So when you teach a creature, it helps you remember the concepts much more clearly. And last but not least, take naps. You see, studies have shown if you study for about 20 to 30 minutes and follow that by about a 10 to 15 minute nap where you wake yourself up after that with an alarm clock or what have you, that actually helps you learn better because your brain makes better connections right after you study. So if you can't fit in a nap, rather than doing that, just study right before you actually go to bed. So that when you go to bed, those connections that you were making as you were studying will solidify. Now this doesn't also have to be a nap. It could also be a 10 to 15 minute walk. It could be maybe you're listening to music for a few minutes. Maybe it's just hanging out. Anything that just gets your brain off the subject, doesn't require energy on the brain, will really help you study efficiently. So set a timer for about 30 minutes to study, 10 to 15 minutes to sleep, and 30 minutes to study, and you will see drastic results. Now, if you're specifically studying for nursing or anatomy and physiology, I want you to check out this video next, because these are some core concepts that are hidden within all of those topics that you're learning about. So if you watch this, it'll help you understand everything you're learning that much better.
If this video has been helpful for you, I would love it if you would like and subscribe to Organized Biology.